Welcome back to Mrs. Taylor's Sewing School. This is another reference and resource video for my students in the complete course for beginners. This video will be featuring zippers. Now every class is learning zippers. Every beginner's course is learning zippers. You may be putting in a centered zipper or an invisible zipper into your garment, and either way I try to teach you both methods so that you are prepared to make your own garments with whichever zipper you would prefer. So some quick reminders about zippers before we start the demonstration. You can use either kind of zipper for your garment as long as your garment is just your basic standard garment. Dress, skirt, pants, that kind of thing. Anything too heavy duty, you're going to need a strong enough zipper to do the job. So if you have a dress or a pair of pants and you want an invisible zipper when the pattern calls for a centered zipper, that's okay. It's up to you. You just have to insert it properly. Now, an invisible zipper is probably not appropriate for a pair of pants unless it's as part of the side seam, but a skirt, a dress, something like that. So just remember, you might remember from class when I showed you the invisible zipper, and I know I've talked about this, about the option of choosing either zipper. So here is your just regular standard zipper, and this is how we're going to be putting in the centered zipper, is with this one. And then our invisible zipper would be this kind here, with this little teardrop kind of pull. So invisible, centered. These are the two different kinds of zippers I will be referring to here in this video for the beginners. And when you're inserting these, if your pattern calls for a regular zipper like this, and you want to do an invisible zipper, all you have to do is make sure that when you insert the zipper, you are stitching on the seam allowance, on the stitching line that is allowed for your pattern. So if your pattern allows for a 5/8 seam allowance, make sure that your stitching line is right there on that 5/8. Just like with your regular zipper, if you choose to do a regular zipper instead of an invisible, just make sure that you are using the 5/8 seam allowance. And of course I will show you how to do this in this video so that you can refer to it later and always have this good reminder and resource. Okay, so let's get started. I am in the process of sewing 2 new pillowcases for my husband. As you know, he's in need of pillowcases right now. They make him smile. So I have 2 new pillowcases. The first one I'm going to show you, I'm going to put in a zipper in the centered zipper. And I'm putting zippers on the pillowcases because one, it keeps it on the pillow, and then also it keeps any critters out when he goes camping and that kind of thing. So this first one is on this really nice soft flannel, and it will be with the centered zipper. And so the first thing you're going to do with the centered zipper is you're going to baste your seam closed. So if you remember your basting stitch is that longest stitch length. So on my machine, I'm going to set my length to 5. On your machine, it might be a 4. I've seen it a little bit shorter, a little bit longer, depending on your machine. Either way, use your straight stitch and go to your stitch length adjustment. If it's a button or a knob, whichever it is, find your stitch length and set it all the way up to the top, as long as that stitch will go. Okay, so I have mine lined up. And I'm going to check my seam allowance. Now when I cut out these pillowcases, I gave myself 1/2" seam allowances. So that's the line I want to follow, and there's my 1/2". I'm a little bit off, so I'm just going to change my needle position really quick. Sorry, I guess I should have been a little more prepared. Okay, that's better. But it's always better to double check. Now I'm going to stitch just a basting stitch to close the seam where I want to insert my zipper. And you don't have to backstitch because this is temporary. It's going to be coming out. We just need that seam closed so that we can get a really nice, smooth, centered look. We want it exactly down the middle of the seam so that everything lays nice and neat. Okay. So I have that now. Okay, so I am going to open up this fabric and I will show you in a second. I'm going to get it all laid out for you first. Okay, here we go. There we are. So here is my seam. Now you're going to lay this out and you're going to open up your seam. And you're probably going to want to press it open with your iron. Right now I'm just going to finger press it. It's flannel, it stays open pretty well, and this isn't a garment, so I'm not going to really need to do a lot of pressing. It doesn't have to look quite as sleek and finished, but definitely on your clothing, dresses, skirts, you're going to want to press it because you want it nice and crisp, lay open really nicely. Okay, so it's laying open for me now. I'm going to take my zipper and I'm going to keep it closed, zipped up. I'm going to lay it face down, zipper down, onto the seam. And I'm going to center those zipper teeth right over the seam. So there it is. There's my seam. Here are my teeth, and I'm laying the teeth directly over that seam. There it is. So I get that laid out, nice and neat, completely centered all the way down. And now I need to pin it in place because I don't want it going anywhere while I'm stitching it. And when you set it at the top, you can line up the top of the zipper tape with the top of your seam, or depending on the application where you're putting it, you may need to measure down to include the seam allowance for whatever's being attached here. You're going to want to make sure that there's enough room from the top of the zipper pull up to the top of, or the beginning of your seam allowance. Because if we're going to be stitching right here, it might get a little bit tight with this zipper pull. But I know that I have 1/2 inch here, so it shouldn't interfere. But just in case, we'll double check. There it is, 1/2 inch, and that goes right at the top. It's right there above the pull, and that's right where I want it. So there's not too much room. It should close it up really nice and neat. And that's also going to finish off these tapes. It's going to be included in that seam allowance, and it's going to be nice and neat when we're done. Okay, so I'm going to pin this a little more. Now, depending on your fabric and how much you trust yourself, you may need more pins, you may need fewer pins. There are a couple of different ways to pin it. You can pin it the way I am, going all the way across. I do this because the zipper stays closed while you're inserting this. So once you have this side secured, this side's not going to go anywhere because it's attached to the other side. So I don't feel the need to pin both sides separately. If you've tried it this way, you don't like it, you don't feel like it stays secure, you are more than welcome to, of course, pin it separately, in which case you would pin it here, go up and over the teeth. There it is. Now this side is pinned. It will stay pinned while I stitch this side. Yeah, you get the point. So I'm just going to pin it like this. I don't feel like I need a lot of pins here. This fabric isn't slippery, neither is the zipper. So I don't need a whole lot of pins. I need it just enough to hold it in place. And after you've been sewing for a while, you might feel like you don't even need to pin it in place anymore. Maybe just one at the top, one at the bottom, maybe somewhere in the middle if that zipper tape is getting pretty long. And that's okay too. If you can keep that centered, absolutely, more power to you. So I feel like that's enough pins for now, especially just for this example. So now I'm going to show you how I'm going to stitch it on. So I am going to start right here at the top, and I actually like to start just below the pull. I don't want to start all the way up here because then I have to edge around here and it ends up making it nice. Well, not very nice, makes it a little crooked. So I start right down here and then I finish off this top part later after I've done this side. So I'm going to start down here and I'm going to stitch all the way down. And you don't want to be right next to those teeth. You don't want to crowd those teeth too much because that doesn't give you enough. Remember, your zipper pull is actually bigger than your teeth. So there's kind of a line right here in the middle of the tape. Not sure if you can see it on the video. Here we go. So you can kind of see that there's a line. Here we go. There's a line going down the middle of the tape, and you can see it better over here. And I'm going to be just on the inside of that line. So I want to stay nice and close to the teeth so that there's not a lot of gap, but I don't want to crowd it. That zipper pull is probably going to take up about this much space. And so I need to make sure there's enough room between there to get through. So stitching lines about there should give me enough space. Okay, so now we get to go back to the machine. Right now I just have my standard zigzag foot on. I'm going to take that off. And I'm going to use my zipper foot. This foot, it should look something like this. It might look a little bit different. It might be a little bit smaller. Or you might have two zipper feet, one for each side. They should come standard with all new machines. If you got a used one, then you may need to buy a replacement at the store. Okay, actually, I need it on the other side. So you can see that you can snap it onto this side to get close to the tape over here. But where we're starting, the tape is going to be on this side of the foot. And so we put the foot on this is my right side, because the teeth are going to be on the right side. And this will allow us to get the needle as close to the teeth of the zipper as possible. I'm going to pull my thread over to that side. There we go. Okay. And make sure that you adjust your needle position. You can see that if I lowered this needle, it's going to go right down in the middle of my foot. And that's going to cause a whole lot of problems, starting with a broken needle and maybe even a dinged foot. So I need to adjust that position. So right now it's going to go through the hole, and that's the important part. And then I will adjust it more if I need to. Okay. So I'm going to get my fabric under here. And I'm starting on this side. And I want to get that foot, the back of that foot, past my zipper pull because it's causing a lump. I can't get it quite as close as I want. So there we go. That should be good. Now, the best way to follow it along, stay straight, and get a good width on here is to have the back of this foot, this part right here, it's going to follow along the edge of the teeth. So right here, if we pressed down, we can feel the edge of the teeth, and there's kind of, it drops down right there before it goes flat. And we want the back edge of that foot, that straight edge, to follow along the edge of those teeth. If we keep it there, and we have our needle in the right position, which I actually want to move that over a little bit, so I'm going to do that now. So if we have our needle in the right position, and that back portion of the foot is following along those teeth, then you're going to get a nice, smooth, evenly distributed amount of space between your teeth and your stitching line on both sides. And that's very important for a nice, straight, centered zipper. So actually, I think that's a little bit too much. There we go. I like that better. So now that I'm satisfied with the width I'm giving my zipper, I'm going to go ahead and put my needle down. And this is not a baste, this is a real stitch. And remember, this stitch will be seen on the right side of your fabric. So it's kind of like top stitching. You want to go nice and slow, and you want it as straight and pretty as possible. And remember to back stitch. There we go. And then I'm going to finish off the top portion of this tape once I finish the rest of the zipper. And it's okay to come back and do that if it's in an awkward position to start out with. It's difficult to get to it right away. That's okay. You can stop and start your line if you need to. The less you have to do that, the better. But it is absolutely doable. Oops, and I sewed over one of my pins. Please don't do that. That's not a good example.
Oh, take the pin out. Yes.
So I'm just following along that line, making sure everything is staying straight and that the zipper's not slipping. It's staying right in the middle. And yep, that looks good. So I am getting a little bit off center here. But right now I'm more interested in speed than accuracy, just so you don't have to sit here for the next hour while I put in my zippers. Okay, now make sure this fabric is staying nice and straight. The zipper is staying centered right there on the seam. Okay,
The bottom keeps it nice and
Almost done. Now as we get down to the end, you're going to see that this zipper is way too long for this particular seam. That's because it's just an hilt zipper that I had, but that's okay, because zippers can be trimmed. Now if you have just a standard zipper with plastic teeth, that's going to be the most common kind of zipper you're going to find. It makes it very easy to do this, to trim your zipper. If you have a zipper with metal teeth, it's a little bit more difficult. There are quite a few more steps, and I'm not going to be able to show you how to do that well here. I will just show you how to manage it with plastic teeth, and then you can adapt it from there, or you can send me an email, ask me to explain that in greater detail. I'm getting down to the end, and it's getting a little bit cramped, and that's because it's going into a corner over here. I don't think I'm going to be able to make it much further, so I'm probably going to end this within the next few stitches here. Just want to make sure it's going to lay nice and neat. Okay, so I think I found a good ending point right about here. I'm going to backstitch for a little extra support. Okay, now what you're going to do, there are a couple different ways of doing your centered zipper. You can go all the way down the first side like we did. You can, now if you have a zipper with metal teeth, you do have to do it this way. So you come all the way down, you stitch across to the teeth, to where your zipper stop would be. If your zipper is not too long, if it's the right length for that seam, especially in a dress. So you would stitch across to the stop and back stitch across that way. And then you would take your needle out, go back to the top of the other side. You'd flip your foot over to the other side and do the same thing. You would stitch all the way down and then stitch over to the stop and back stitch across there. So it would be coming down and over and then down and over, and that's how you have to do it with metal teeth. That's kind of the more professional way of doing it. But I'm going to show you a nice easy way that I don't think looks less professional. So we're going to pivot across it. So we leave our needle down, we're going to lift the foot up, and we're turning our fabric. Okay, so we're going to stitch across the teeth. Now, that is why if you're using plastic teeth, this is going to be just fine. But if you have a zipper with metal teeth, you cannot do this. Metal teeth will break your needle. Okay, so I've got to make sure that my fabric is nice and flat under here. I'm not going to be stitching any lumps into this. There we go. Okay, I think that's good. So now I have that down. I'm going to put my presser foot back down. Everything's laying nice and flat, and I'm going to stitch straight across. Here we go. And now I'm going to backstitch over the same line just to give it a little extra support. This is pretty much optional. You kind of know what your project is like, if there's going to be a lot more wear and tear on it. If the top stitching needs to be a little more minimal, you can make the decision. Okay, so I think one more stitch should get me onto my stitching line. That should be good. Now I'm going to turn it again and go back up the other side. Now if I put my foot down here and I have not gone far enough over, that's okay. You just lift the foot up, turn the fabric over again, and go that little extra distance. So now that I have it lined up, I'm going to make sure everything's laying nice and flat again, and things look good. So here we go. And I'm going to get back up this other side as quickly as possible. But I want you to stitch nice and slow while you're first learning. So you can see that this other stitching line is holding it in place really nicely. But this zipper was folded up for a while. There are a couple of bumps. So I'm just going to make sure to press it down so the bumps aren't staying put when I stitch it. It's laying nice and smooth so that when I do stitch it, it's going to stay nice and smooth. And please be careful when you're doing this. Don't get your fingers too close to the needle, okay? We don't want anybody to sew through their fingers. If you need to, you can use a tool like tweezers or your seam gauge. Since you're probably going to have these near your machine anyway, you can use those to help feed it under the needle, so that you don't accidentally stitch through your fingers. Now, it wouldn't be good to sew through your metal tools either, but it would be a lot better than, a broken needle is always better than a broken needle with blood. And if statements like that are too macabre for you, please leave it in the comment section. Oops. So I'm not sure if you saw that, but I was not paying attention. And while I was going so fast, and I stitched way too close to my tape on that section. I am probably going to have to rip that out and redo it, but I'm not going to make you sit through that. I'm going to finish this off so you can see. But just so you know, accidents happen, mistakes happen, even to perfect sewing teachers like me. So that might be something that you're going to have to do as well. And I'm going to put it back on course. Here we go. I'm going to pay attention to the rest of it. Okay, now I've gotten to this point. I do not want to have to sew a curved line around my zipper pull. So this is what you would do to get around it. You get to about this point, or maybe even stop a little before it. And I'm going to take my zipper pull and I'm going to pull the zipper or push the zipper, or however you can get it, back behind my needle. And I'm going to have to lift up my foot, and tweezers definitely come in handy for this, because I know me, my fingers are way too big. So we pull or push or whatever you can do the zipper back past that point. It's given me a little bit of grief, but you can wiggle it. You can kind of turn it. Try to keep your needle in the fabric while you're doing this, and make sure that you're not jerking the fabric around so much that it's going to cause the needle to tear it. There we go. Okay, it's a little bit stuck, but now it's going for me. You know what? I think that's good enough. Okay, I got my foot back down. This is trying to go sideways. I'm going to put it back in line. And now I'm just going to sew this tape, so I'm not really going to worry about what this is doing right now. I'll worry about that later. Right now, I just want to stitch on here. Okay. Here we go, and I want that same amount of space. I want to stay the same amount of space away from the teeth. And I'm going to go all the way up Again, keeping that same stitching line. And back stitch at the top. There it is. And now I get to fix the other side. So you can do this a couple of different ways. You can just shift it over. You can shift it over like this and take the foot off and switch it over to the other side. Or what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, I'm just going to turn my fabric again. Easy enough. It's right there. There we go. And I'm not even going to cut my thread yet. That's just going to waste my time at this point, and it'll get cut eventually anyway. So this zipper pull needs to go further down. I'm going to pull that down a little bit more really quick. It's going to be in my way. There we go. Okay. All right, so I have that nice and centered. Oop, well, I did. Okay. So this piece of zipper tape is being quite ornery. So I am going to pin it in place. I don't want it to go anywhere. I'm tired of messing with it. There it is. Okay. Now I get to start stitching again. And now that I have it held in place by the presser foot and the needle, I can go ahead and take that pin out. I'm going to back stitch it all the way back. There we go. It's trying to eat my fabric. See if I can get past that point. There we go, that's better. Sometimes when you don't have enough fabric on there, you start at a weird point. Your machine might not like it and might try to eat it. Okay, so I was busy talking and not paying attention. But when you sew back down to finish off that other side, you want to meet the other stitching line. I was a little bit off. Here we go, I can go ahead and take it off. I was a little bit off meeting it. I came down and instead of watching it from up here so that I could make sure to meet it, I ended up having to jerk it over. So it's not going to be, it's going to be very ugly on the top half of it. That's okay. My husband is not very picky. For yours is going to be so much prettier though. It's not going to have any of this ugly wavy stuff because you're going to be going nice and slow and only concentrating on stitching that zipper. You're not going to be talking to the camera or checking the picture as you go. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and now I'm going to clip my threads. And then we can, I'm going to tilt the camera so that I can show you what I'm doing next. Okay, there we go. So we finished, oh, there you are. We finished this up. There's our zipper, but we still have this seam that we had basted closed. So now you can take your seam ripper, and everybody should know how to use this. If you've been to my class, you know how to use a seam ripper. Okay, now you can kind of see the top stitching on here, especially through these light blue parts. So you can see that the stitching is definitely visible on the top side of your fabric. Okay, so I'm going to be taking out that basting stitch, and it should come out really fast and easy, but please, please, please be very very careful when you're taking this out not to accidentally catch your fabric in your seam ripper. There we go. Having a hard time staying on camera. Not to catch your fabric in your seam ripper because you'll end up putting a hole in it, and that causes all kinds of problems. You'll have to put a very interestingly placed applique or something. All right, so I'm not going to undo this all the way, just enough to kind of show you what we've got. Okay, so you can see how this is going to end up looking. It's going to have these two little laps of fabric. It's going to be centered in there, and there's our zipper. So your zipper is probably going to be visible a lot of the time. It's going to peek out under this fabric. Even if you have this nicely pressed, what you're going to want to do, press it really lightly with a pressing cloth. Don't push on it too hard, or you're going to get zipper indentations. But just give it a nice little kind of press or steam it, and then brush it down. Careful not to burn yourself. Use something to brush it down. And yep, and there's your zipper. That's your centered zipper. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you at the bottom, because remember I had to trim my zipper. Sorry about that. Okay, I have to trim my zipper. So I'm going to go ahead and show you kind of the basics of that really quick. So I stitched across the bottom of this already, and I reinforced it because I knew that I was going to have to trim my zipper. And so when you trim off your zipper, you're going to have to create a nice stop because the existing zipper stop is not going to be there anymore. Now, it is possible to take off this nice little metal zipper stop with your with a pair of needle nose pliers, or if you have some jewelry beading tools. I'm sure you have some really good tools to utilize for that purpose. But it's a lot more difficult, and it doesn't always work out so well. So you are... what I recommend doing is just using thread to close off that seam. So you can stitch across it a couple of times, like I did, or you can use a little bar tack stitch just right across there. Either way will work. Just use your best judgment for your project. And then we are going to go ahead and trim off that excess zipper tape. Okay, sorry, I had to grab my scissors. Now I have my scissors. Now here is the bottom of my seam, and I can trim it level with that, or I can trim it above there. I'm going to go ahead and trim it level with that so that it gets, actually, you know what, I'm going to trim it just a little bit before. If I had another seam, so sorry about the noise. If I had another seam to stitch right here, and the tape were going to be caught in with that seam like it is on the other side, then I would trim it level so that it would be caught in that seam and put a little extra security on there. But it's not, so I'm going to trim it just a little above that. And you can use, just use plain scissors. You can use just plain scissors to cut right across the plastic teeth, but I don't recommend you use your really nice fabric scissors because, as you know from class, that will ruin them. Use your utility scissors. Okay, so then I have this excess there you are, this excess bit of zipper tape, and I can just toss it. And I'm going to toss it into our fabric recycling bag. As you know from class, that's where we recycle all our fabric scraps at donatestuff.com. Check it out. You can donate any of your used clothing and jewelry, even fabric scraps like we have at the class, little bits of scraps of every kind of fabric. We toss it in there and they recycle it. It's an absolutely wonderful program. Okay, so we've trimmed the zipper. We've stitched it in. We've centered it. And there it is. That's your centered zipper. So now I get to show you the invisible zipper. A lot of fun. I actually think it's a lot easier than the centered zipper. So the next pillowcase I'm making him is going to have the invisible zipper. Now I got an awfully long one. So I am going to be installing it on the long edge of my pillowcase instead of the short edge. And I could just trim it like I did with the other one, but it's going to be important for you to know how to finish off the seam where the tape ends. So we're going to actually stop stitching here at this point on the tape, and then we're still going to have the whole rest of this seam that we need to finish off. And it's a little bit different with an invisible zipper, so you're going to need to know how to do that. So I'm going to be doing it on the long edge of the pillowcase. Now normally you would, have the zipper on the short end. So if that's a little weird for you, that is why we're doing that. Okay, so I'm going to show you two ways of putting in an invisible zipper. You can use your regular zipper foot, or you can use an invisible zipper foot. And I will continue with the demonstration in the next video. Thank you very much.